Well, first of all, thank you for coming. And second, it's a good time if you still want to grab a drink or food or use the bathroom right here. He'll start in a few minutes, but then it'll go on for about 30 minutes. So we're trying to keep it less traffic running through during that time. So feel comfortable grabbing something right now if you want. You want a drink? Anybody? All right. We appreciate you being here. This is awesome. We got people from all over. Some of Austin's friends, some wonderful neighbors, some of Lennon's friends' parents that know the neighbors. We're all intertwined. That family. People have been part of Austin's journey in a lot of different ways. Hearing it from across the street, from maybe when it wasn't as good as it is now. People that helped contribute to his education, to recommendations. It's wonderful to have this group here. So Austin just returned from New York. You know, I think we all know, but he finished his second year at Manhattan School of Music in Bassoon studies. He's also accomplished piano player, saxophone, and plays a few other instruments in there. I know like the day I picked him up, I think he had just been at Carnegie Hall playing that morning. He won't tell you all this, so I can brag. He was hired by Juilliard to play on the New York Philharmonic Youth Symphony. Tomorrow night, he's on his way to Poland. He'll be there for a few days and on to Italy for a music festival in the summer. And then he'll be home back in the States for a few weeks. And then off to Finland, Helsinki, for the fall semester. And then we probably won't see him again until 2024 or at the end of this year.
Wow.
I want to hear a lot of playing before you go.
Yeah. So maybe I'm going to grab my drink and you can tell them a little bit about what's going to happen here.
So I'm going to be playing 8 pieces from a series of works by Francesco Mignone that is called 16 Waltzes for solo bassoon. And as you can see, this is a solo bassoon. There will be no accompaniment or anything. And it's kind of a strange thing. I know this is not like your typical weekend plans going to see a bassoon recital. Nothing else other than that. But so Francesco Mignone, the person who wrote this, was a Brazilian composer, and doesn't have the most Brazilian name because his father was an Italian immigrant, and he came to Brazil. And Mignone was he was a great even from an early age, like 10, he was playing in bars and stuff with this music called choro, which I'm going to talk about later, which is a big influence on a lot of his compositions and a lot of the compositions in this collection as well. He wrote for all sorts of things. He was a classical composer, although he also wrote in his own, like in Brazilian styles, and wrote choro stuff and stuff like that. And he wrote lots of piano musics, all that sort of stuff, orchestral music. There's lots of great stuff out there. But the reason that he wrote this stuff for the bassoon, he wrote some other stuff for bassoon, was when he went and studied at the Paris Conservatoire in Paris, and he met this bassoonist named Noel Devos, who was a fantastic bassoonist, and they became friends. And Devos actually ended up traveling to Brazil a lot, and they had a great relationship. And these works he pretty much wrote for Devos as something that he could play. And Jim, one of them, I'm not playing it tonight, but that is, it says, the title is basically just a dedication to him. And another thing that's interesting about that was, of course, Devos came from Paris, they were studying in Paris, so Devos was playing on a French bassoon, which is not something that really is done anymore. This bassoon is a German bassoon. Pretty much every bassoon that you'll see in orchestra and any sort of performance will be a German bassoon. Now, the difference between the French bassoon and the German bassoon is the French bassoon is a little smaller, and the key system is a little different, and it has a much brighter tone, and the high notes come out a lot easier, and you can get into this really extreme register. So you'll hear quite a few high notes even with this first piece, and that's what a lot of composers try to, we'll stay away from that if they know what they're doing, unless they're going for a very specific sound. But that was one of the reasons why there is so much of this in this, was because it was written for a very similar but very different instrument. Mignone was also a very nationalistic writer, as a lot of Brazilian writers were. Not writers, composers, writers as well, but he was a composer. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. He was friends with an author by the name of and musicologist by the name of Mario de Andrade, and there's a certain piece of information I'll tell you later about that. But anyways, I will kind of play some and talk some and go through them. And the first one I'm going to start with is called Mysterio, or Mysterious, and then the subtitle is Quanto Amie, which is How Much I Love You. Oh, How Much I Love You. I'm just going to play a few notes. So that was the first two, Mysterio, and then that second one was called Valsa de otra esquina, which in English means Waltz of the Other Corner. It's kind of an odd name, and I think what it comes from is Mignone also wrote a series of 12 pieces for piano, solo piano, called Waltzes of the Corner in English. So this is the Waltz of the Other Corner, and I guess it's bassoon, piano. So they're two separate places. But those are the first two. Now moving on to this next one is called Valsa Improvisada, which means improvised waltz. one is called Valses Choro. And you may remember I mentioned Choro earlier, and Mignone was very involved with Choro, and lots of his friends were. And Choro is a very important Brazilian music. One thing that's interesting about it, and interesting in the context of this, is it's a entirely, for the most part, or at least in its origins, instrumental music. Whereas a lot of the musics that came to Brazil from Portugal and from all these other places were typically sung, or like later there's one tune I'm playing that mentions modinha. When modinha was a style of music that came from moda, which was a Portuguese style, and inha or inho in Portuguese means like little, it's a diminutive. But that was a sung style with guitar accompaniment, piano accompaniment. And so choro came from a lot of these different styles, and it's a music that's very usually upbeat, lively. It's the typical instrumentation will be like a solo instrument like flute, clarinet, accordion, something like that, and then there is accompanied by string instruments and a percussion instrument that's always playing 16th notes. And usually, almost exclusively, they're all in 2/4. So it's in like a 2 time. So it's all felt 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So some of the things, oh, and one last element of choro that's very important is the form. And this is something you'll probably hear, is there's some sort of section, usually called like an A, and that plays, and some of the ones I've already played have been like this. And then there'll be a new section called like a B, and then it goes back to the A, and there'll be a new section. So you get this kind of like starting thing, new idea, back to the start, new idea, back to the start, and maybe a little coda or an ending section. And a lot of choro music is based on that form, almost all of it entirely. In classical music, it's called the rondo form, if you've heard of that. But now what's interesting about this is he calls it valses choro, or choro waltz. But the main elements, it's not very upbeat. It's actually kind of almost feels like it's more leaning into the literal meaning of choro, which is to cry. And it's also in 3 because it's a waltz. And the main thing that I think links it is that sort of form. And you'll hear I'll start with one thing, and then it'll be something different, and then it'll go back, and that back and forth, and there'll be, this one doesn't have any sort of like little coda at the end. But I hope that you'll hear that, and at least get to appreciate that. I will talk about choro a little bit more with this program. Also choro. And you'll hear me blowing on this. That's actually the sound I want. It's called a crow, double reeds, especially, or bassoon double reeds at least. That's the sound that you're going for. It means that the reed is vibrating, at least a little well. So. Now, staying on the same Shoro track, this next tune, or waltz, I guess I should say, is called Appianete mio fiagottino, which means I've got you, my little bassoon, right? that inyo. And it's a funny title, and this comes from another Shoro tune written by Ernesto Nazare, who's a very famous and very well-known and prolific Shoro composer, especially in the early time. Shoro kind of came into being in the 1880s and went into the 1820s, and then it had like a revival in the middle of the 20th century. But anyways, that tune that Ernesto Nazare wrote was called Appianete cavaquinho. And cavaquinho is an instrument kind of like a ukulele. It's a small 4-string instrument that is used in Shoro, and it's one of the quintessential Shoro instruments. So that was like, and it's a piano piece, and that was kind of like, Shoro has this element of like, you know, all these fast notes and these arpeggios and these crazy runs and stuff, and there was this vibe of like, oh, you come to a hoda, which is like, it's like means circle. Shoro would usually be played around a table, and there'd be foods and drinks, and the listeners were as much as a participant as the players. But there was also this vibe for the players, like, let's see what you can do and what I can do, and let's see who can play it faster, sort of thing. So this was kind of like on the piano saying, like, look, I can do all this stuff that you can't do on cavaquinho. So this is Mignone playing into that tradition, also making fun of it a little bit, as you'll hear. And in the subtitle, it's called, it's a parody waltz. So playing off of Ernesto's Shoro tune. And this one also has that sort of form where there's an A, a B, an A, C, and this one has a little coda. So some sort of different way to end it. Mignone having a little bit of fun there. This next one is just titled, it's written plus, like a plus sign, 1, then space, 3/4. And I think it just means another 1 and 3/4. When they're all in 3/4, they're waltzes. I think he was kind of running out of ideas for names. But another thing with these waltzes is that they don't really have, or it's very hard to tell what the intended order was, or even when they were written. There are dates, but the dates are publication dates, and they're published in certain books in certain orders. And like, there was a recording of Noel Devos, the bassoonist, who was written for playing all of them in a row, and he does it in a certain order. And there's another recording that I've listened to of Frank Morelli, who's an important bassoonist who's alive today, and he plays them all in a certain order, and that order is a little bit different than the book that I have, but it's kind of similar, and like I have kind of similar order, but it's hard to tell, so it's kind of up in the air. So this order is someone that I had picked and kind of put in a place, especially since I'm not doing all of them, that I thought would make the most sense. Anyways, I thought I should mention that. Yeah, so another 1 and 3/4. And this is, I always find this as a kind of funny marking, so I'm going to share it. At the top of the page, where you usually get tempo markings or some sort of style or something, he has written "with inner joy." So, see if you can find the inner joy. This next one is called Mignone, and you may have heard of it. It's the name of a novel, by Mario de Andrade, who I had mentioned earlier, who was a good friend and teacher and schoolmate of Mignone. And Andrade, also a musicologist, was a big proponent of, he was another big nationalist and nationalist writer. And there was this big movement in the 1960s of lots of composers and writers and all sorts of artists in Brazil came together because Brazil very much, you'll hear people say, I took a class this last year on Brazilian music and history and performance as part of the reason, I guess I should have mentioned that at the beginning, that I'm doing this and that I wanted to share this music. But we learned about the history in Brazil. You'll hear people say like, oh, it's not like, they're not racist there, or like, because of the way the culture is established and it was built. And it's true to a certain extent. It's very different than it is here, but there's still lots of difficulties when it comes to race relations and stuff like that. But we were learning about how, especially when the Portuguese came and settled, and they were, like for example, Mignone's father was Italian. They were encouraging as many like white Europeans to come over as possible because they were trying to, there was this idea of I forget the word in Portuguese, but it basically means whitening. And they were trying to bring as many of these settlers over because they thought, oh, what we'll do, because they had, Brazil was the largest importer of slaves by far. It was incredible from Africa, like the amount of people that they brought over. But so they were like, oh, to make the population better and to make us less and more civilized, we're gonna just try to whiten the population as much as possible. And we're trying to get out all that indigenous and all that African blood. And so in this movement, the whole idea was, I forget, I'm not gonna try to say the Portuguese word for this either, but it means basically self-cannibalism, and it's like cultural self-cannibalism, which is a strange word, but what it means is what makes Brazil so great and such a great culture and nation is the fact that it is so diverse, and there are all these different ideas, races, nationalities, foods, musics, anything you can think of, and that you should encourage all of that and embrace it and try to consume as much of it as possible, bring it into yourself, and then create something new. And like Héctor Villa-Lobos, who's a very famous classical composer, he was like a prime example of that. He tried to take all this music and influences from like Stravinsky and other places, and there's pop bands that took a lot of influence from jazz and groups like the Beatles and stuff like that, but to take all that, absorb it, and create something new, and to encourage this this identity of it being multi-everything. And so Mignone is this story with this character who's supposed to represent Brazil and all these different things that how it was shaped. And it's supposed to be, the hero is called a character without character, and the subtitle of this one is a waltz without character. But so that's kind of the background for this one. Quite a lot like behind it, at least in the novel, and of course Mignone and Andrade were friends. So Mignone. So water is very important for reed. If you don't have a wet reed, it's not going to do very much. This last one, called Aquela Medina que ouvia não escreveu. And that means this waltz or that waltz, or sorry, that modinha that Villa did not write. And Villa-Lobos was the man I just mentioned, the composer. So this is kind of like a jab at him, saying like, look, I wrote music too. Because Villa-Lobos, Mignone is a important name, it's well known, but Villa-Lobos definitely is you say like, oh, Brazilian classical composer, at least for classical musicians, people will say, oh, Villa-Lobos. And for good reason, he's a great composer. But they'll kind of making a jab at him. And this is that style I was mentioning earlier, the modinha, which was a sung style. And also this is another interesting one because the modinha, like I said, it came from this Portuguese style, the moda, and it came over and they made the modinha. It evolved out of that. And modinha ended up being separated into like the salon style and the street style. And the salon style would usually be accompanied by piano, in a salon for the elite, the Portuguese elite in Brazil. And the street style was often just by street musicians. There'd be a singer and accompanied by guitar. And there was actually a point in Brazilian history where if you were caught playing a guitar on the streets, if you had a guitar, you could be arrested. And because the guitar was associated so deeply with the low class, and there was this really big class dynamic where if you even seemed like you were not wealthy, you would, things like that would happen to you. But anyways, it is one of those interesting things where you have this style that was staying in between these two worlds. And as soon as the modinha started taking off more and more, the popular ones, the street ones, then it fell out of favor of the Portuguese elite, and of course they adopted something else. Anyways, that's this one. And this will be the last waltz that I will be performing tonight. And I just wanted to say once again, thank you all for coming out. Very nice, and I appreciate the opportunity to share all this music with you.